now for our guest. I've been waiting for this because I got a lot to say to this guy and ask him about.
I love his name too. It's Elzie D. Flenard III. So you can't make that kind of stuff up. So welcome to the show, Elzie. Tell us all about what you're doing.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. And I have to distinguish which one I am because there are 4 Elzies now. So it's important to pick the right one. So basically what I do is I help people grow their podcast. A lot of people have podcasts now, but it's very difficult to stand out now since there are so many other people that also have podcasts. My number one mission is to help people grow their shows, which in turn helps to grow their businesses. So my number one job in life when I wake up in the morning is to grow podcasts. Picture a little garden where I'm planting the seedlings of podcast success, and it grows up and sprouts into beautiful blossoming flowers.
So my first question, when we talked about this earlier, I said you really started this in 2016, and we're saying like NPR had podcasts, iHeart had some. iHeart since has grown its podcasting platform immensely to be the biggest in the world, right, Kenya?
Yeah, we have actually. So we're the #1 commercial podcaster.
So how did you know in 2016 to get into podcasting? Like that was prescient, right?
Yeah. So the abbreviated version of this very long story is I started an internet radio station, mainly because I wanted to interview and talk with and have conversations with successful business owners and entrepreneurs. I wanted to learn from them and to grow my own knowledge by having those direct conversations. So my thought was, okay, I'll start this station. I'll have my show, Entreprise now. We're talking business, and I'll also have other shows on the station so we can talk business 24/7 all around. And what happened was I ran across an actual podcast, like a real podcast. And I fell in love with the medium, and I'm a recovering engineer. So I started doing some research and some planning, and I started doing some projections, and I said, okay, I think this is going to be a thing. And so I shut down the internet station, focused on my podcast, and really grew my business from there.
So it's interesting that you did some math, I guess, drawing from your engineering background on that. So what kind of things did you look at when you were trying to figure out whether this would make sense?
Yeah, so one of the main things I looked at is the trends in on demand in general. I looked at things like Netflix and the fact that people want what they want, when they want it, how they want it. And I thought that audio was going to go that same direction. People are going to want to listen to the topics and the subjects they want to listen to, where they want to listen to it, and how they want to listen to it. And so I thought that audio podcasting specifically was going to fall in line with that trend. And I started to look at, okay, it's growing year over year steadily. And then I started to notice certain players starting to get involved in the space. And that led me to believe that this is not only going to be a thing, but it's going to be a big thing.
So a lot of people are starting their own podcasts now. Thanks to Kenya Gibson, who you can see here.
Yes, thank you, Kenya.
Thank you. We started this radio show a little over 2 years ago, and she gave us the podcast, or iHeart gave us the podcast along with it. And we were like, oh, we get a podcast. It's like, okay. But and Kenya came up with the format, and we've really been enjoying doing it. People thought we were crazy as a law firm to do a radio show and podcast at that time.
Well, they thought our marketing director was crazy.
That's me. But they don't anymore because now podcasts are ubiquitous. I mean, it's going to be like having a website, right?
Oh, absolutely. I made the bold prediction that in 3 years, you're going to have a website, you're going to have a blog, and you're going to be in the space in some form, whether you're advertising on podcasts, whether you're guesting on podcasts, or whether you host a podcast, you will be in the space.
Absolutely seems like that's the direction that things are going. And I would just ask, with all these podcasts out there, how do you cut through the noise and, get your message delivered to your market or your listeners?
Yeah, and it's tough to be quite honest, which is why I exist, right? People hire me because they want to grow, they want to stand out, they want to put together a show, a product that's going to number one, reflect their brand, and number two, attract their ideal client. So part of it is injecting your personality into the content, being yourself, being an authority, and quality is a big factor as well. Having a high quality show that people want to listen to, that they get value from, that's going to help you stand out.
So what do you tell people when they come to you ready to start a podcast? Like, what is the first thing they need to do? Or maybe Kenya and you can talk about this together.
We've been doing a lot of this trial by fire stuff with podcasting, to be quite honest. What are some of the mistakes people make when they are starting a podcast? There's got to be some, and I'm sure we've made some of them.
Yeah, talk about mistakes. I think I've probably made all of them. I think the biggest mistake is not being prepared and not really having a strategy behind why you're doing the show in the first place. A lot of people, and back in 2016, I would go into networking meetings. I was the only one with a podcast, and I was the only one who even really knew what a podcast was. I go to a networking meeting today in 2020, everybody knows what a podcast is, and a lot of people have them. So I think having an extremely strong why is super important, because that's going to carry you through that episode 7, 8, 9, 10, when you realize, OMG, this is actually a lot of work. And in order to grow this thing, I'm going to have to put in the hard work. Your why is going to carry you through. But second to that, strategy. Have a strategy. Understand why your format is what it is. Every single thing that you say, every segment, everything that you do with your podcast should be purposeful and intentional, and it should align with the why and the strategy behind the show. Some people just grab a microphone from Amazon, plug it into their computer, and go. That's probably not going to work for most people. If you already have an audience, maybe that works. But if you're starting from scratch, you want to know your why, you want to have a strategy, focus on quality, and make sure that you're consistent.
Elzie, we're sure that this journey has not been easy. What are some of the challenges that you faced, and what's it like to be an entrepreneur running your own show, if you'll pardon the pun? What are some of the hurdles that you face, for example?
Yeah, the best way I can describe that is, I don't know if you guys are a roller coaster enthusiasts, but it's like a roller coaster. And the thing about this roller coaster in particular is you're responsible for building it. So if it crashes, it's your fault. Or if it does well, it's also your fault. And just when you think that you're going up, there's a steep decline on the other end that you didn't even know about that hits you, and then your stomach goes into your throat, and then you stabilize, and then you grow. It's literally one day I'm the best entrepreneur on the face of the planet. The next day, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So it's everything that I imagined and more, but it's extremely difficult. It's a hard job, but I love it. I think I'm built for it. It's in my bones, and so even though it can be up and down, it's absolutely the best decision that I've made professionally.
So if you don't have iHeart doing it for you, and you're a normal person sitting in your own studio at home, how do you start a podcast? I assume there's equipment that you need to have, a dedicated space, or at least a quiet space. Like, what do you tell people to have to start?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the famous salesperson's answer. It depends, right? Because again, it depends on why you're doing the show in the first place. If it's a solo cast, then maybe all you need is a microphone, USB, plug it into your laptop, and you can do it from your closet. I actually have a client. She does it from her closet, and she sounds fantastic. But if you are a panel show that you're going to need 3 other guests, your closet probably is sort of weird to ask people to come on your show and come into your closet. You probably want to stay away from that. So I would say it depends on what type of show you want to do and kind of what your goal is. You can do it very inexpensively, or it could cost you a ton of money to produce it, depending on what your goals are.
Well, that's really interesting. Having the right equipment is important, but the right equipment can be expensive sometimes. So you have to find that right balance there. So you mentioned that you were on a roller coaster, and that's kind of what the entrepreneurial experience is like. And I really like that description because it's really true. Can you talk a little bit about what were some of the highs and what were some of the lows on that ride?
Yeah. So some of the highs is, it's limitless, right? On any given day, I can make $1 million tomorrow, but it's limitless on the other end as well. I could lose $1 million. So, I've had several businesses that didn't work for various reasons, right? Maybe the market wasn't ready. Maybe I didn't have enough capital to sustain the losses. So I think some of the lows are when ideas that I had that was really passionate about didn't work, and now I have to tell everybody, hey, this didn't work, and we have to do something else. And seeing the disappointment and the loss of income for people, and really just having to be the person to tell people that this idea, although it could have worked, didn't work, and now we have to do something different. The high is providing opportunity to people, helping people tell their story, and having a voice, and being a part of seeing that light bulb go off when a person realizes how powerful their voice is, and the fact that they can change lives with their message. I wake up in the morning knowing that I'm playing a part in changing people's lives. So that's a high for me.
What are some tips that you can give to people who are looking to monetize their podcast? Because, that's a big thing now with people is, okay, great, I have this podcast, but, how do I monetize it? And maybe monetizing it is not important to some people, but for the people that it is important to, what would you suggest?
Yep. Again, back to quality, strategy, making sure that all of that stuff is tight. And then really just understanding how you want to monetize. I have some clients that they're looking at sponsors. And so obviously sponsors want to know, what's your social engagement? What's your reach? What is your email list? I always tell podcasters, you need an email list. That is literally gold.
Like what size email list? Obviously the larger the better, but what's sort of like the minimum entry to get somebody interested in sponsoring your podcast?
Yeah, it depends. If I have 1,000 people on my email list and my open rate is 80%, that's really valuable, versus I have 10,000 people and my open rate is, I'm gonna just say 1%, just so my math is right. So it depends on the engagement level. If I know every time I send an email, people are gonna open it and they buy, then that's more valuable than if I have a ton of people, but there's no engagement or action behind that.
And then how do you potentially find sponsors for your podcast?
I always tell people, you want to find people that or companies or organizations that align with your values. Going back to my earlier point, first you have to have values and know what the show is about. You want to find shows that align with your values, and you reach out to them and you show them, hey, I have this social reach, I have this on my email list, I have this many Facebook followers, this many people on LinkedIn. I also have this many downloads, and depending on what host you have, you can even dive deeper into those stats. So you present yourself as a well-oiled machine that has an engaged listenership, and 9 times out of 10, sponsors are going to find you.
What are some of the more successful themes that you've had? And when you talk about aligning values, can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So for example, I do a business show, Entreprise now. It's all about business owners and entrepreneurs. For me to have a water sponsor on my show to promote their water brand, there's no alignment there. It's like, what does water have to do with business or entrepreneurship? But if I had a backpack company who wants to promote their backpacks to entrepreneurs who are running businesses that they can run from their backpack, well, there's alignment there, right? Because we're talking to the same people. So I think, especially as a podcast host, you develop trust with your listeners. So you don't want to promote to them something that you don't believe in and that you can't stand behind, because you lose trust. It's really hard to build, but it's really easy to lose.
Nowadays, what is an impressive podcast listening audience, or what is do you count that by the number of downloads? I guess that's how you really gauge the success of a podcast, or are there other ways too?
You can. For me, I've always, going back to Kenya's question, I've always attempted to promote my own products and services, because the return on investment is a lot higher than the time that it would take me to get a sponsor, the social proof that I would have to have, and the work that goes into maintaining that sponsor. The ROI for me to promote my services is a lot higher. So that's another option, right? So promoting your companies or affiliates and things like that. But again, it depends. It's all about engagement. If you have 100 engaged people, that is much more valuable than 1,000 unengaged, if that's a word, unengaged people. So, but if you're a podcast network, engagement and downloads are both going to be important.
So Elzie, do you use a lot of social media marketing to get word on your podcast out? How do you advertise it?
Mostly being a guest on other podcasts is a very effective way. Email lists and social media.
That's really, really good information. I would say, what could you say are some, if you're starting a podcast for the first time, what are some first like immediate steps besides the equipment and so on and so forth that you would recommend people would take?
Yep. I always recommend, if it's an interview show, starting where you are. A lot of times people try to sort of punch above their weight class, if you will, to get these guests that they see on other podcasts. So I would say start small, start with who you know, and then just grow from there. Have a right point of reference in terms of how fast you can grow, and really just be prepared to do the hard work, and grow slow and grow your engaged fan base versus just focusing on downloads. So if you're just starting out, again, focus on your why. Make sure that you have the best quality that you can afford, and have a strategy. Do it because you love it. Focus on the focus, and just do the work and show up consistently.
I think that's great information. I've recently become a fan of Seth Godin, who talks about minimum viable audience. And really, you almost want to walk backwards and you want to say, okay, if I have this number of engaged listeners, and that's going to create this business result for me, whether it's commercials or sponsors or services, whatever you happen to be engaging. And of course, you just have to like to do it too. I mean, if there's things that you want to say and you want to participate in the social discussion around your areas of understanding and expertise, you get to do that too. But it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge audience. It just needs to be your audience. And if it's 10,000 people or 5,000 people or 100 people, really, it doesn't make a difference if you feel like you're making a contribution. And I think it was easy sometimes to get caught up in the numbers game, right? Instead of focusing on what is your purpose and what is your goal. So
Elzie, can I ask you another question? So is it important to do your podcast regularly at the same time on the same day? So like we do this airs on iHeart at 11 p.m. on Sundays, and then it's a podcast release the next day. But people know we're going to do one every week, and it's coming out at this time. Is that important for podcasts, since you can get them anytime you want?
Absolutely. I think podcast listeners in general, I am one, so I can speak to this. I love consistency. I want to know that every week it's a fresh episode. And because what happens is, if you're not consistent, when I go to look to download the latest episode and it's not there, you have about 2 times for that to happen before I go on to the next show. So consistency is extremely important.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm sure you're probably right on that. I never really thought of it that way. So good stuff. So we're coming to the end of our segment. Elzie, it's been great having you on. I hope you'll stick around and join us with some more insights and input as we go on to our Power Move segment and then our presenters. You're listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gerhart. We'll be right back after this message.